He thought he was signing away control of the company. What he didn't know was that his wife still had to approve the transfer. When the accountant said so, the plan he had built around his son began collapsing in front of everyone. My name is Lily Harper, and today I'm telling you the story of Evelyn Cross, a woman who spent 22 years being introduced as Richard's wife at company dinners, while quietly holding the legal authority her husband had forgotten. When Evelyn married Richard, his father's distribution company was 4 months from bankruptcy. Richard had the name, the connections, and the confidence, but the business needed cash immediately. Evelyn had inherited money from her mother, and she used a large part of it to keep the company alive.
Richard's father knew exactly what that sacrifice meant. He didn't simply thank Evelyn. He made her an equity partner, giving Richard 60% and Evelyn 40%, and put her rights into the company's operating agreement. More importantly, any transfer of controlling interest required unanimous partner approval. For 2 decades, she managed the books from their home, rebuilt the company's accounting systems, negotiated payment schedules with vendors, and found the waste that was bleeding money. The company grew from 9 employees to 90. Richard became the public face. Evelyn became the person who knew where every dollar had gone. But over the years, Richard began treating her contribution as background noise. At shareholder dinners, he introduced her as his wife. When people praised the company's growth, he accepted the compliments. When Evelyn offered financial advice, he often answered with a distracted smile and changed the subject.
She didn't fight him over recognition. She simply kept the records. That became important when Richard decided to hand the company to his son, Aaron. Aaron was Richard's son from his first marriage. He had worked at the company for several years, but he had never built the systems that kept it profitable. Richard, however, had already decided that Aaron was his successor. For 18 months, Richard secretly paid consultants to prepare Aaron for the top job. He authorized leadership programs, private coaching, and expensive business travel. The money came from company accounts. Evelyn didn't know the purpose of those expenses at first. She only knew that several invoices bothered her. Then Richard called a family meeting.
He stood at the head of the table and announced, "I'm ready to retire. Aaron will take over the company." Evelyn looked at him. Richard didn't ask her. He didn't even mention her role in the business. Aaron smiled as if someone had just handed him a birthday present. Everyone started congratulating him. Evelyn said nothing. Richard interpreted her silence as acceptance. Aaron interpreted it as weakness. But Evelyn was doing something else. She was remembering the operating agreement. A week later, the family gathered in the company's conference room for the transfer documents.
Richard sat at the center of the table. Aaron sat beside him. The company lawyer reviewed the paperwork while Diane, the senior accountant, checked the financial documents. Evelyn sat quietly at the end of the table. Richard signed first. Aaron signed next. Then Diane closed one folder and opened another. She slid it across the table toward Evelyn. "I need your signature, too." Richard laughed. "That's just a formality. Evelyn isn't involved in this part." Diane looked directly at him. "No, without her signature, the transfer isn't valid." The room went silent. Richard's smile disappeared. Diane explained that the operating agreement required unanimous partner approval before controlling interest could be transferred. Evelyn was still a legal partner. A small smile crossed her face, not because she enjoyed Richard's shock, but because she understood that the document he had ignored still protected her. Her signature was not ceremonial. It was the signature that could stop the entire deal. Richard stared at her. "You knew about this?" Evelyn answered calmly. "I remembered." For the first time, Richard went completely pale, looking frightened rather than irritated. He had spent 22 years treating Evelyn like someone who stood beside the company. She was actually written into its foundation. Most people would expect her to refuse immediately. Evelyn didn't. She asked for 7 days. Because Evelyn wasn't deciding whether to sign. She was deciding what her signature should be worth. There was another reason Evelyn wanted the restructuring. She had watched what happened to Grace whenever the family talked about the business. Richard praised Erin for being the future, while Grace was told she should build a career somewhere else. Evelyn had never challenged that arrangement because she believed keeping Grace away from the family politics was protection. Now she realized it had taught her daughter the wrong lesson, that family businesses belonged to the loudest person in the room.
Grace was 24 and finishing her MBA. She understood finance, operations, and modern distribution systems, but she had never been invited into the company. Evelyn offered her no shortcut. She told Grace that if she wanted a stake, she would have to earn her place through work and accountability. Grace agreed. That made the new holding company more than a revenge device. It became a succession plan Richard had never bothered to imagine. And Evelyn knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't taking control because she was angry. She was building the future that Richard had been too careless to protect. During those 7 days, she met privately with Diane and her attorney. Diane brought her something more important than the operating agreement. She brought the invoices. The consulting fees Richard had approved for Erin were not clean. Several payments had been routed through companies that provided little evidence of real services. Money labeled as leadership development had been used for luxury travel and personal expenses. Worse, some of the transfers had been authorized without the partner approval required by the company's own agreement. Evelyn had spent years keeping the company financially healthy. Now she saw that her husband had been using those systems to build his son's future without her knowledge. She could have exposed everything immediately. Instead, she asked one question. What happens if I don't block Erin? Her attorney answered, then you negotiate. That changed everything. Evelyn didn't want to destroy the company she had helped save. She wanted to stop being invisible inside it, so she drafted a restructuring proposal. Erin could become president. Richard could retire. But controlling ownership would be divided between Richard, Erin, and a new family holding company owned by Evelyn and Grace. The agreement would also require Evelyn's written approval for any future transfer of controlling interest. No secret handoff, no family announcement, no assumption that her silence meant consent. Her signature would finally match the authority she had possessed for 22 years. When the second meeting began, Richard expected the quiet wife from the first meeting. Instead, Evelyn walked in beside her attorney. She placed 3 folders on the table. The first contained the operating agreement. The second contained the questionable invoices. The third contained her restructuring proposal. Richard opened the first folder, then the second. His face tightened. Erin looked confused. Evelyn spoke calmly. I am not trying to take the company away from you. Richard looked up. I am asking you to stop giving away something you never owned by yourself. Nobody spoke. She explained that she would approve Erin's leadership role if the new structure protected the company, corrected the financial irregularities, and preserved her legal rights. Richard pushed back. He threatened to fight. Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She simply told him that if they could not reach an agreement, she would provide the financial records to the original investors and let them decide whether the company's leadership had acted responsibly. That ended the argument. Richard signed. Erin signed after him. But this time, Erin wasn't smiling. He finally understood that his father had promised him something he couldn't actually give away. The company wasn't Richard's personal inheritance. It was a business built by several people, including the woman he had spent years overlooking. Months later, Evelyn sat at the same kitchen table where she had managed the company's books for 22 years. Grace sat beside her. 2 laptops were open. 2 names appeared on the new company documents. Evelyn looked at her daughter and smiled. For years, she had taught Grace how to read a balance sheet. Now she was teaching her something more important. Never confuse being quiet with being powerless. Richard had forgotten Evelyn's signature, but that wasn't the real mistake. His real mistake was believing that because she had never demanded recognition, she had never earned authority. He thought he was handing his son a company. Instead, he gave Evelyn the moment she needed to remind everyone exactly what she had built. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying what someone loves. It's making them finally respect the person they spent years underestimating.